Honorable delegates, now we will have a debate on the geopolitics since World Wars to tell today. Let's start with the United States.
Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, we all know who runs the world, the United States. We saved Europe in two world wars, ended Cold War, and made sure the global economy survives. Russia, you tried to beat us, but broken into pieces and you failed. And China, your Belt and Road Initiative is just a fancy way to say we are going to loan you money and own your country. And you think you are the next superpower? Please, you keep making cheap products, we'll keep leading the world.
Russian Federation.
USA and UK, the world's self declared superheroes. USA, you invade more countries than you visit on a vacation and then act shocked when people not see you as good guys. And UK, oh dear, still trying to act important? Your empire retired, but you didn't get the memo. You are like an old rock band that had one hit song centuries ago and still won't leave the stage. And USA, stop lecturing us about the freedom when you spy on your own people. Honestly, watching this too is better than watching reality TV shows. But these shows have actual explosions.
United Kingdom.
Oh, Russia? Still here, huh? Always acting like the ex who cannot move on. Why is NATO getting closer? Well, maybe because your neighbors are tired of your drama and don't want you near them. Ukraine left you a long time ago, and you're still sitting outside waiting them back like some sad broken record. You keep saying Ukraine belongs to us, but news flash, they have blocked your number. And Russia, you're not fooling anyone with your I'm sorry messages. No one believes you anymore. Maybe stop being creepy and go find some new friends instead of stalking your ex all day.
China.
America, let's be real. You say we buy influence, but at least we don't invade countries to get it. You fight wars, we do business. And the UK, what happened to you? You rule the world. Now you just follow America around like a lost puppy. You lost Hong Kong, you lost your empire, and soon you will lose your relevance too.
France.
Russia, you still pretend to be powerful. Cute. You seem like that old person sitting alone in the bar and discussing about those old golden days. And China, you keep praising yourself as raising power. Peaceful raising power. But we all saw what you did with Taiwan. We friends do not need to do this. We friends do not conquer territories nor steal resources. We only make smart deals while drinking wine.
Germany.
Oh, look, Russia still thinks it's scary. Newsflash, you lost your empire, and now your neighbors treat you like a weird old uncle, and nobody wants to sit next to you at dinner. You keep saying you want the Cold War, huh? But let us be honest, China has got the money now, and us, we are running the Europe's economy, while you all fight still it's 1945. Come on.
Japan.
Oh, Russia? Still trying to take land. I lost a war, got bombed, and now I own the tech and gaming world. Maybe you should try surrendering once. It worked wonders for me. While you wrestle with sanctions, I sell anime, sushi, and robots worldwide. And China, you copy everything. So when will you copy my democracy? When will you copy my peaceful economy? Maybe then your people can Google things freely. Now, I run the tech world while you both struggle with sanctions and censorship.
Egypt.
You all act like you are the biggest deal in history. Let me remind you, we have been around 5,000 years here. Empires rise, empires fall, and guess what? We are still here. USA, Russia, China. One day you will be the just in history lessons like Romans and British empires. Em- Enjoy your time while it's last.
Brazil.
Oh, look at the USA and the UK acting like main characters in a movie no one wants to watch. USA, you keep saying you protect democracy, but all I see is you bombing countries and calling it freedom. And UK, stop pretending you're still a global power. Your empire is gone. Match. Now you just drink tea and follow America around like a lost puppy. Meanwhile, we are over here enjoying football, the Amazon, and actually having a good time while you are playing like children. Madam President, I recollect a Hollywood movie named Avengers whose actions resembles the USA's attitude. Both saves the world by destroying it.
India.
Honorable Chair, respected members, and my fellow nations. World War I started with a small argument like a husband and wife fighting over a remote. Suddenly everyone in the room started yelling. Then came World War II, where they decided, why not make it a show? Let's throw in some bombs and call it a show. The Cold War was just two people ignoring each other for years like a lovers. But instead of quiet grudge, they had nuclear weapons under the bed. And today, geopolitics is like a couple arguing over whose turn it is to take out the trash, while both secretly hope the other finally take the hint and do it first.
United Kingdom.
Russia, you lost in the Cold War and you'll keep on losing. Just accept that you're not the villain you think you are. You're just a meme now.
Russia.
Oh, UK, you still think you're relevant? Your biggest global achievement today is selling tea. Stay in your lane, sidekick.
United States.
Oh, Russia. Stop talking about NATO. We do not annex the Crimea or Ukraine. We do not interfere into Belarus sovereignty. Oh, wait. That's exactly what Russia doing with its neighbors, right?
Russia.
Oh, says the country that forces democracy on the nation using bombs. Your version of help is like a firefighter who sets the house on fire without rescuing the people.
All the delegates, please maintain decorum. Please be silent. Thank you. The provisional agenda for this meeting is maintenance of peace and security of Ukraine. The agenda is adopted. I call upon the Honorable Secretary General to make her opening remarks.
Thank you, Miss President. Miss President and Excellencies, few days ago in the newly agreed Pact for the Future, world leaders reaffirmed their commitment to international law and to the Charter of the United Nations. Our organization is based on the principle of sovereignty of all the member states within their internationally recognized borders. The Charter unequivocally stipulates that all the states must refrain from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any other state, and the international disputes must be settled by peaceful means. Russia's full scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, following the legal annexation of the Autonomous Republic of Crimea a decade ago in 2014, is a clear violation of these principles, and civilian populations continues to pay the price. I strongly condemn the attacks on civilian and civilian facilities wherever they occur and whoever is responsible, and they all must stop immediately. I remain deeply concerned about the safety, humanitarian needs, and basic human rights of people residing in the occupied areas. Ms. President, despite immense challenges, the United Nations is fully engaged as the largest international presence in Ukraine. Together with our partners, we have provided life saving aid to more than 6.2 million people, but we need the support of international communities. I urge the donors to extend their support. We are assisting the Ukrainian government in recovery and reconstruction efforts. Thank you.
I thank the Honorable Secretary General for her statement. As the Rule 37 of Provisions of Rules of Procedure allows a non-council members to participate in a meeting if the interest of a state is affected. We have Ukraine and Belarus to join us. I request all delegates to stand and mourn for the lost lives in Ukraine war. 20 seconds. I now invite the representative of Ukraine to present their concern.
Thank you, madam, for allowing us to raise our voice and express our concern. Respected dignitaries, the security situation in Ukraine deteriorated rapidly following the launch of Russian Federation military offensive on 24th February 2022. The armed violence escalated in at least 8 regions, including Kiev, Donetsk, and Luhansk. This escalation has triggered an immediate and steep rise in humanitarian needs as essential supplies and services are disrupted and civilians flee the fighting. As per the UN estimates, 12 million people need relief and protection, more than half of them being women and girls, while more than 4 million refugees may need protection and assistance in neighboring countries in the coming months. Madam President, since the start of the war, the Ukrainian ports in the Black and Azov Sea have been blocked by Russia. Our ports on the Danube River remain the target for missiles and drones. It is a clear attempt of Russia to weaponize the food shortage on the global market in exchange for recognition for its captured territories. We thank the world leaders who supported our Black Grain Sea initiative and Grain from Ukraine program. More than 45 nations from Algeria and Spain to Indonesia and China have seen the importance of Ukrainian food. Russia is weaponizing nuclear energy by spreading unreliable nuclear power plant construction technologies and turning our power plants into dirty bombs. It occupied our Zaporozhye power plant and threatens with radiation leaks. Till today, various terrorist groups have kidnapped women and children to blackmail, but today it has become the government's policy. We have evidence of tens of thousands of people abducted by them in the occupied territories and later deported. The International Court of Justice has issued arrest warrant against Mr. Putin for this. This is clearly a genocide. Thank you.
I invite the representative of Russian Federation to speak.
Distinguished Miss President, ladies and gentlemen, for years, Russia has been trying to make Washington, London, and Brussels understand that although they left their signatures in the official documents of OSCE summits under the obligation not to ensure their own security at the expense of others. In fact, the North Atlantic Alliance has been carrying out geopolitical and military expansion in Europe for over 3 decades, trying to establish their position in the Trans-Caucasian region and Central Asia, creating direct threats to the security of our country. The same situation is happening in the Asia Pacific region, where NATO's infrastructure is creeping in and where military and political blocs are being created, undermining the inclusive security architecture under the ASEAN in order to contain People's Republic of China and Russia. Madam President, they expect to defeat Russia through an illegitimate neo-Nazi Kiev regime. I will not dwell upon the threat of the very idea of trying to fight Russia, a nuclear power that would lead to a bitter end. Thank you.
Ukraine.
Madam President, the history shows that it was Russia who deserved nuclear disarmament. Terrorists have no right to hold nuclear weapons. Moscow has weaponized oil and gas to weaken leaders of other countries, and now it is weaponizing nuclear energy. The death toll keep rising. Nearly 10 million have fled their homes. Systematic attacks against hospitals, schools, and supermarkets are only adding pain to the misery. Power cuts and infrastructure damage have left millions in the dark. Today, we sit together with world's most powerful countries, yet no one is able to do anything about the most extensive conventional war the world has seen in decades. Every day, Ukrainians are wounded and killed. Russian bombs hit residential buildings. Today, even an ordinary bread factory became a target. Putin has no answer, and Russia never ever has an honest answer when asked why its army kills children in Ukraine. Russia fights not for justice, but a blackout of its neighboring nation. Putin has no answer why he drags Belarus into the war, why his propagandas threaten nations in the Caucasus or Central Asia, or why he drags Iran and North Korea into the scene. As nukes are restrained, likewise, the aggressors must be restrained, and all its tools and methods of war. It is not a dialogue between so-called great powers. Somewhere behind the closed door can guarantee us all the new no wars era, but open work of all nations for peace. More than 140 nations and international organizations have supported the Ukrainian peace formula presented by our Honorable President Mr. Zelensky. We have the real chance today to ensure that aggression against any state will not end because your land will be divided and you will be forced to submit to military or political pressure, but because your territory and sovereignty will be fully restored. While Russia is pushing the world to the final war, Ukraine is doing everything to ensure that after Russian aggression, no one in the world will dare to attack any nation. Weaponization must be restrained, war crimes must be punished, deported people must come back home, and the occupier must return to their own land. Thank you.
Delegate of South Africa.
Madam President, we must normalize the war in Ukraine. The guns must fall silent, and there must be peace with accountability and justice served in full respect of UN Charter and the territorial integrity of Ukraine. We are on the brink of the third year of the gravest armed conflict in Europe since the Second World War, with no end in sight. We are deeply concerned about the negative repercussions this war is having and continues to have on the multilateral system. Each decade, Russia starts a new war. Parts of Moldova and Georgia remain occupied. It turns Syria into ruins by using chemical weapons. It almost swallowed Belarus and threatening Kazakhstan and Baltic states. The goal of Russia seems to use Ukraine and its people against the international rules-based order. Many seats in General Assembly may become empty if it succeeds with its treasury and aggression. We must act united, defeat the aggressor, and focus all our capabilities and energy on addressing those challenges. If unchallenged, each one of us has to pay the price. This is not the world South Africa want to be a part of. We will do everything in our power to prevent this from becoming a new normal and preserve the integrity of Charter, not just in Ukraine but also in Palestine and Middle East. The process of healing the rift in international relationship can only begin when peace in Ukraine is achieved. Until then, we will keep pressing for the peace for the generations of Ukrainians, for the brighter and better future to grow and flourish. Thank you.
The representative of Madagascar.
Madam President and the dignitaries, we believe that all state sovereignty and territorial integrity should be respected and protected according to the UN Charter. We also believe that the legitimate security concerns of all countries should be respected. The expansion of NATO raised legitimate security demands in Russia, and we do not want to see the current situation in Ukraine, but all parties must refrain from provoking. We stand against the use of UN Charter Chapter 7 that authorizes the use of force and sanctions in the United Nations Security Council resolution. We believe that the UNSC must play a constructive role in resolving the issue. Russia has reasonable security reasons that must be seriously taken into the consideration. Acts of terrorism which Israel fell victim to on October 7, 2023 cannot be justified. But October tragedy is being used for a massive collective punishment of the Palestinians, which has turned out to be an unprecedented humanitarian disaster. The murder of Palestinian civilians by US weapons must stop. The tragic and unacceptable developments in Arab-Israeli conflict in Yemen, in the waters of Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, in Sudan and in other danger zones in Africa reflect an undeniable fact. Security can either be equal and inseparable for all, or there will be no security for anyone. The unprecedented level of hypocrisy and aggressiveness of the Western policy against Russia not only nullifies the idea of global cooperation promoted by the Secretary General, but even more so blocks the functioning of the entire global control system. Including the Security Council, everyone will feel the high cost if the West does not stop. Thank you.
Russian Federation.
Madam President, a few days ago, this building hosted a summit called Summit of the Future. Russia was supportive of the idea since the crisis of our organization is deepening and something needs to be done about this. There have been many ambitious events in the history of the modern United Nations which ended up with loud declarations that were soon forgotten. The Millennium Summit proclaimed the goal to free people from the scourge of war. And 2 years later, the United States of America, at the head of the coalition of the willing, invaded Iraq, the country which has yet to get over the devastating consequences of this affair without the mandate of UN Security Council. The 2005 World Summit declared its commitment to establishing a just peace in accordance with the purposes and principles of the UN Charter. But this sacred commitment did not prevent the United States and its allies from encouraging Georgia to launch an armed aggression against the people of South Ossetia and Russian peacekeepers in 2008. 3 years later, NATO orchestrated a military intervention in Libya that destroyed its statehood and undermined the stability of neighboring countries. Madam President, I would like to remind the colleagues in the UN Secretariat that the Charter is not only about territorial integrity. The very first chapter of the Charter of UN proclaims the obligation to respect the principle of equality and self-determination of people. There is no need to prove that the Ukrainian neo-Nazis who seized power in Kiev in February 2014 after a bloody coup supported by the United States and its allies never represented the Russian population of Crimea, Donbass and Novorossiya. We value the genuine aspiration of the entire range of our partners to promote mediation initiatives for the very best reasons. We respect their constructive commitment to results as opposed to the dead end peace formula of Volodymyr Zelensky. We encourage our friends to take the above mentioned facts into consideration in their further efforts. The realistic settlement plan was set forth by Honorable President Mr. Vladimir Putin on June 14, 2024, when he once again convincingly demonstrated the goodwill of Russia to achieve negotiation agreements. But these prospects were dropped by Kiev and their mentors following the 2014 coup, failure to comply with 2015 Minsk agreements and 2022 Istanbul agreements. Thank you.
United Kingdom.
Madam President, the European countries are united in the condemnation of this aggression, which violates every possible principle and the law, including the UN Charter. Though this council failed the people of Ukraine, they have not failed the international community even in the darkest moments. It remained as an active member of the United Nations who stood solidarity with other countries. A year ago, when Slovenia experienced devastating floods, which buried hundreds of homes and drowned people, Ukraine was at the forefront to stand by them in tough times. We call again the Russian Federation to cease all the hostilities and withdraw their forces from the Ukrainian territory within the internationally recognized borders. A peace with respected borders, human rights, and the UN Charter. Until it comes to Ukraine, Ukraine has every right to defend itself from this aggression according to the Article 15.1 of the United Nations Charter. Madam President, with this war, a lot is at stake. If Russia wins, then trampling of international humanitarian law and the gross violations of the United Nations Charter would win. If Putin prevails, not only the Europe, but the whole of the world would become less safe and stable. The United Nations was created to prevent the big countries from imposing their wills and rules. So we should not allow the countries to violate the rules just because they believe they can. Thank you, Madam.
Delegate of Russian Federation.
Madam President, the Western leaders who are very obsessed with the topic of human rights at every given opportunity pointedly remain silent about these rights in relation to racist actions of their Kiev clients. In light of this forgetfulness, I would like to remind another requirement of the UN Charter to respect the rights and fundamental freedom of any person regardless of their race, gender, language and religion. The rights of Russians and people associated with the Russian culture have been methodically eradicated following a coup in Kiev. The Russian language has been prohibited on all spheres on a legislative level: education, media, culture, and even everyday life. Another law banning the canonic Ukrainian Orthodox Church has been adopted recently. These gross violations of rights of Russians enshrined in the UN Charter, along with the threats to security of Russia and entire Europe, which comes from the Ukraine and all those who pull it into NATO, are prime causes of the current Ukrainian crisis. The special military operation which Russia is carrying out to protect its security, the present and the future of people on their indigenous land is aimed at eliminating those threats. There is no moral justification for those who try to prove the innocence of Nazi torturers, collaborators, and their current successors in Ukraine, the Baltic states, Canada, and other countries. Madam President, the world faces massive challenges which require united efforts rather than confrontation and desire for global domination. Russia will always be on the side of collective work, truth and law, peace and cooperation in the interests of reviving the ideals laid down by our founding fathers. The main thing is that everyone, without exception, must respect these principles not selectively, including the principle of the sovereign equality of all states. Then, while working for the honest balance of the legitimate national interests of all countries, we can bring to life the purpose of the UN as stated in its charter. Thank you.
Belarus.
Thank you, Madam President. All sides must refrain from stalking panic or hyping up the war. The US and West are pouring oil on the flame, undermining Russia's security through eastward expansion of NATO all the way to Russia's doorstep. We oppose the use of sanctions on Russia to solve the conflict as they do not have any basis in international law. They only create new problems and interfere with political settlements of conflicts. To find a lasting and sustainable peace, military force cannot be the solution, but political dialogues and peace talks can. The West must stop aiding Ukraine with weapons and money, which would further escalate the war, far from achieving peace. The Secretary General speaks of global cooperation at the very moment when the countries of the West have unleashed a war of sanctions against more than half, if not the majority, of the countries of the world, and the US dollar, promoted as an asset and a good for all humanity, has been crudely turned into a weapon. Ways of ensuring security in different regions will have to be reconsidered. Drawing lessons from the bitter experience of the functioning of NATO-oriented or Euro-Atlantic security models, which the West has exploited for its expansionist intentions. It is possible to resolve the most complicated issues which the entire humanity has faced only in cooperation with due account of each other's interests. The West must realize this and break its neo-colonial habits. Thank you.
I thank all the representatives for their participation in the discussion. The United Nations Security Council call upon the Russian Federation to immediately curtail their violation of international norms and allow for the reconstruction of Ukraine. Thank you. Honorable members, now we shall move on to the topic on to the discussion of Israel war crimes and humanitarian rights violation in Gaza. I call upon the delegates of Palestine and Israel to sit. I now call upon delegate of the observer state of Palestine to speak.
Mr. President and Excellencies, the human rights situation for Palestinian civilians across Gaza is catastrophic. According to figures verified by our office, close to 70% of those killed in strikes selling were women and children from age group of 5 to 9 years old. According to Ministry of State of Palestine, at least 43,000 Palestinians were killed by horrific attacks of Israel Defense Forces since 2023. Last year, more than 1 lakh people have been injured, and these numbers are likely to be a serious understatement. Nearly 1.9 million people have been displaced. Israeli strikes on shelters, residential buildings, and safe zones clearly proves that nowhere in Gaza is safe. This shows Israel's choice of warfare and their failure to comply with fundamental principles of international humanitarian law. Israel's act of warfare has destroyed Gaza's infrastructure, including places that are protected under international law, hospitals, and vital services including water, electricity, and sewage. This contributes directly to the famine risk being discussed today. Israel has killed hundreds of medical personnel, civilian police, generalists, and humanitarian aid workers, including more than 200 of our own United Nations staff. Thousands of Palestinians were taken from Gaza to Israel, usually shackled and blindfolded to be held isolated. Israel is obliged under international law to protect Palestinian civilians and to provide them with supplies essential for their survival. Basic services for Palestinians in Gaza have been decimated. Particularly, northern Gaza is not fit for survival. Mr. President, Israel must stop and there must be accountability for its crimes. The order of International Court of Justice in case of application of genocide conviction in Gaza Strip must be implemented now. Now is the time to prevent and stop violations of international humanitarian law through diplomatic and economic pressure. Thank you.
I now give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I am Israel's youth delegate. I would like to start the statement with sharing a piece of my personal story. Between 2018 and 21, I lived in the Kerem Shalom kibbutz, one of the many Israeli communities in the vicinity of Gaza Strip. The definition of Kerem Shalom in Hebrew means the vineyard of peace, and my purpose of living there was to help kibbutz build a unique and diverse community, notwithstanding the security challenges. My bedroom was in a bomb shelter. This was due to the very short distance from Gaza, which enabled the citizens of that community a few seconds to find a cover when there has been an indiscriminate rocket shelling from Gaza. This has been the situation for many of these communities for the past 18 years since Israel disengaged from the Gaza Strip. And yet, I choose to live in this amazing place with this amazing community because life continues. And I believe that life should not be dictated by terror. This is what also guided most of the people living there. They choose life, not terror. But on October 7, 2023, while people were celebrating the Jewish holiday of Sukkot, terror caught them with a message of fear and hate. The place that I once called home suffered a heinous attack, as did the many other Israeli communities. The terrorists of Hamas came with arms, guns, grenades. They purposely alleged, killed, wounded families, and abducted over 200 Israelis. This horror incident against innocent men, women, their elderly children, girls, babies, and persons with disabilities is more than words can describe and a soul could bear. Section 17 on the Declaration state quotes the acts, methods, and practices of terrorism in all its forms are activities aimed at destruction of human rights, fundamental rights, and democracy, threatening the territorial integrity, security, and destabilizing the legitimately constituted government. Hamas is holding 200 kidnapped people, many of them in need of medical treatment and medication. They are being held there with their most basic rights denied, in absolute contradiction to the international law, and in matter that places their lives in extreme danger. It is important for us to make it clear that Israel is in war against the terror organization called Hamas, not citizens, not individuals. The international community should not tolerate this and condemn the actions of the genocidal jihadist terror organization called Hamas. Thank you.
The Arab Republic of Egypt.
Honorable President, distinguished delegates, the Arab Republic of Egypt stands deeply alarmed by the ongoing crisis on Gaza, where relentless violations of international law and human rights are being perpetrated against the Palestinian people. The deliberate targeting of civilians, the destruction of critical infrastructure, and inhuman blockade on Gaza constitute clear war crimes and collective punishment. The illegal settlements and systematic displacement of Palestinian communities undermine further prospects for peace and violate their right to self-determination. Egypt calls upon this esteemed body to take decisive action, end the aggression, lift the blockade, ensure humanitarian aid those in need, and hold perpetrators accountable. As a nation committed to just and comprehensive peace, Egypt remains its support for establishment of independent Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital. And finally, I conclude, let history judge us by our actions, not by our words. Thank you.
Brazil.
Honorable President, distinguished delegates, Brazil stands in solidarity with the Palestinian people and expresses profound concern ongoing crisis in Gaza. The devastating loss of civilian lives, the destruction of essential infrastructure, and the perpetration of a blockade that inflicts immense suffering on millions are unacceptable and constitute violations of international law. Brazil strongly condemns these actions, which further exacerbate the humanitarian crisis and undermine the prospects for a peaceful resolution. We call upon the international community to act decisively by facilitating an immediate ceasefire, ensuring unhindered delivery of humanitarian aid, and holding those responsible for violations accountable. Brazil reaffirms its unwavering support to a two-state solution, envisioning a sovereign and independent Palestinian state coexisting in peace with Israel. Let us rise to the challenge and reaffirm the principles of justice, humanity, and international solidarity. Thank you.
Audience, please maintain silence. The voting process has begun.
Now, the voting on the resolution to mandate Israel to allow humanitarian aid and economic assistance to Gaza. Those who are in favor, please raise hands. Those who are against, please raise your hands. Those who want to abstain, please raise hands.
Voting has finished. Results will be declared, Honorable Chair.
Thank you. The result is as follows. In favor, 11. Against, 0. Abstention, 4. As the resolution got the required majority of 9 votes, the United Nations Security Council instructs Israel to stop targeting civilian structures, allow medical assistance, and contribute the economic aid for reconstruction of Gaza. The next item on agenda in the meeting, a resolution to recommend the General Assembly to consider expansion of permanent members in the United Nations Security Council to include Brazil, Germany, India, and Japan. The agenda is adopted. I now invite the delegate of Brazil.
Thank you, Madam President. I today take this opportunity to press the most important reform of the Security Council. The expansion of permanent members, or I would say the process of decentralization of veto powers from the so-called elite countries. Since 1945, after the end of the Second World War and establishment of UNO, 5 countries are thought to be powerful and best countries to ensure world peace and stability. But the victors of the war have shaped the UN Charter in view of their national interest away from the changing realities in geopolitics. With the increase in UN membership from 51 at creation to 193 today, as well as systematic and normative changes after the Cold War, there is an inadequate in efficiently maintaining international peace and security by P5. Brazil has become an influential economic power and it has advanced as a nation that cares not only for its interest but also the interest of international community. We are the world's 6th largest economy and a democratic country. Madam President, we have demonstrated an effective leader through our activities in BRICS and the non-permanent member the most times. We host international events like 2014 FIFA World Cup and 2016 Rio Olympics. Let the world know that we have infrastructure, security, transportation system prepared for the world international spotlight. We also support India, Germany, Japan in their bid to UNSC permanent membership. Thank you.
The representative of Germany.
Madam President, as Brazil expressed, the present distribution of the power in the world is very uneven, and so the imbalance between the number of members in UNSC and total member of United Nations. The composition must be restructured at the earliest to represent the reality of present times. Germany, as the fourth largest contributor to the UN, a leading provider of development aid and also a major player in many areas of UN works, aspires to be a permanent member. The country is no longer the enemy state of 1945 or the assassin state of 1973, and it has developed as supporter of multilateralism. Therefore, together with our G4 partners, Brazil, India, and Japan, actively advocates for the reform in the UNSC. The Security Council is the centerpiece of international security architecture. If it does not ensure adequate representation of the global south and major contributors to UN system, the Security Council legitimacy and authority are at risk. Thank you.
Japan.
Thank you, madam. Japan fully aligns with the statement of Brazil and Germany on behalf of G4. The veto power is being misused to protect the interest of P-file, while majority of the member states have been emphasizing the limited use of veto under certain circumstances. Reform at a Security Council is an urgent task, and discussion on veto is an important part of it. This year marks the 80th anniversary of the foundation of UNO, and we must not let this moment pass by. We must make concrete progress in discussion on an integrated model to realize a more representative, efficient, and effective Security Council as soon as possible. Japan has a history of supporting national building in a variety of places, and now more than ever wishes to offer the wealth of experience. We have an active donor of humanitarian assistance across the world. Japan has shared the impact of Second World War and strictly remained as a peace-loving nation. We aspire to realize early reforms of UNSC, including the expansion of both permanent and non-permanent members. We also want to secure a permanent seat on the council, and we make to persist effect to this end. Thank you.
The representative of India.
Thank you, Honorable President, and esteemed colleagues of the House. Today, I stand here on behalf of 1.4 billion Indians to say if United Nations is to remain relevant in 21st century world, it has to reflect today's realities, but not yesterday's power structures. When it comes to India, my motherland, we are one of the founding members of the United Nations, and we are the world's largest democracy. And remember, India is the fifth largest economy and soon gonna become a $5 trillion economy. India is the second largest contributor to the United Nations peacekeeping force, and our contribution to the peacekeeping force is even more than the combined of the P5 nations. If our contribution, collaboration, commitment, and sacrifice aren't enough to get a single seat in the United Nations Security Council, then what else is needed? We are not asking for favor, we are asking for fairness. We don't demand privilege, we demand justice. We are not seeking power, we are seeking representation. The change must happen, and it must happen today but not tomorrow, because if change is delayed, then justice is denied. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I now call upon the delegate of the United States.
Madam President, the United States is in favor of the much needed reforms in the UN and the Security Council by resolving the deadlock between the members. I hope that other nations will also find a way to allow new voices in the UN to address the key challenges like war, hunger, terrorism, and displacement. We support the permanent membership of Brazil, Germany, Japan, and India. Thank you.
United Kingdom.
Thank you, Ms. President. Our position is well known. The United Kingdom supports the expansion of Security Council in both permanent and non-permanent categories. We also support the G4 and creation of 2 permanent seats for African nations and 1 seat to be rotated among island nations. We are committed to UN Charter for equitable representation of world that would enable the United Nations to decisively respond to new threats to international peace and security. Thank you.
Delegate of France.
Madam President, France is in favor of expanding the permanent seats in United Nations Security Council for Brazil, India, Germany, Japan, as well as greater representation for African countries at the Security Council. There is no doubt that a comprehensive reform of United Nations Security Council must allow to increase its representativeness by meeting the legitimate expectations of Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Thank you.
Russian Federation.
Thank you, Madam. Russia indeed favors a more representative Security Council. The way the present Secretariat is staffed, with key positions in fact occupied and inherited by the Western minority, has to be changed. The Secretariat must promote unifying ideas rather than find excuses to integrate pro-Western narratives into the work of United Nations. A more equitable world order needs increased representation of Global South in the United Nations Security Council. We reaffirm our position in support of Brazil, India, and the initiatives of the African Union. At the same time, of course, there can be no talk of additional seats for the Western countries which are already overly represented in the UN Security Council. Thank you.
Representative of China.
Zhonghua, Zuxi Nusi Zinchi Anlehu Helie, Zhenhang Kuara, Xiang, Dian Zhengzi,
Kwan Bianhua. African nations must be given representation in the UNSC to correct the historic injustice towards a continent that comprises 54 countries and 1.3 billion people, 28% of world's population. They demand 2 permanent seats and 3 non-permanent seats, and we support them. Also, the UN states must not fall in the influence of few countries and interest groups who pursue their own selfish and small circle interests when it comes to the council reforms. We oppose any attempt to include more members from the already represented regions of Asia and the West. Thank you.
The voting process has begun.
Thank you, everyone. I now put forward the resolution for voting. Those who are in favor, please raise hands. Those who are against you, please raise their hands. Those who want to abstain, please raise their hands. Thank you.
Voting has finished. Results may be declared. Honorable Chair.
The result is as follows. In favor, 12. Against, 1. Absent, 2. As the People's Republic of China used its veto, the resolution is rejected. This resolution will not be sent to the General Assembly as a recommendation from the UNSC. Thank you. The next item on the agenda, deployment of United Nations peacekeeping force in Bangladesh. In view of the recent civilian unrest, political instability, and atrocities on religious minorities, I invite Bangladesh to sit in the meeting. I call the delegate of India to put forward the resolution.
Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, today we address a pressing concern, the safety and security of vulnerable population, particularly minorities in Bangladesh. While Bangladesh made significant strides in development and governance, the challenges faced by Hindu minorities as well as other religious and ethnic communities cannot be ignored. India has deep cultural, historical, and geographical ties with Bangladesh, and we remain committed to Bangladesh to support towards its peace and prosperity. However, the alarming reports of violence, discrimination, and marginalization of Hindus and other minorities raise legitimate concerns about their safety and rights. India does not take this issue lightly. The protection of minorities is not just a domestic concern, it is a matter of global human rights. The escalation of tensions and sporadic acts of violence against vulnerable groups in Bangladesh highlight the need for international oversight to ensure justice and accountability. India believes in the sovereignty of all nations, including Bangladesh. However, when vulnerable communities are at risk, the global community has a moral obligation to act. The deployment of United Nations peacekeeping force could serve as a temporary impartial mechanism to protect minorities and prevent further escalation of tensions. India urges this council to carefully deliberate on how to balance Bangladesh's sovereignty with the imperative to protect minorities and uphold human rights. We must act decisively and with compassion to prevent further harm to those who cannot defend themselves.
Bangladesh.
Thank you, Madam President. Bangladesh stands resolute in opposing the development of United Nations peacekeeping force within its border. Our nation has always upheld peace and demonstrated remarkable resilience in addressing its internal challenges. रोहिंग्या शरणनीति परिस्थिति होक बा मज मध्य राजनीतिक उज्जैनी होक न केनो बांग्लादेश मनुष्य संकट मोकाबिलाय तक दे शकमता प्रमोन करे छे.
The people of Bangladesh have proven their ability to navigate crisis, whether it be the Rohingya refugee situation or occasional political tensions.
Suggesting that we require foreign peacekeeper undermines our sovereignty, national dignity, and the capabilities of our institution. The presence of United Nations peacekeeping force will not only distort our internal harmony, but also sends a signals that Bangladesh is unable to manage its affairs, a narrative that is both inaccurate and unfair. We have strong democratic institutions and a commitment to peace which negates the needs for external intervention. Instead, We call upon this council to focus its efforts on providing resources, development aids, and technical supports to strengthen Bangladesh's exiting framework. Sovereignty and self-reliance must remain paramount, and we respectfully ask all the nations to reject any resolution that undermines this principle. Thank you.
The representative of United Kingdom.
Thank you, Madam President. The United Kingdom firmly supports the deployment of United Nations peacekeeping force in Bangladesh. While we recognize the sovereignty of Bangladesh and the nation's efforts to maintain peace, the international community must act when internal challenges risk regional instability. Recent reports of escalating tensions and protests, coupled with the ongoing strain on Hindus and other minorities, have created a precarious situation. This is not just a domestic issue, but rather a regional and global concern that requires a multilateral response. The United Nations Peacekeeping Force has a proven track record of fostering stability in complex scenarios. Their presence in Bangladesh would provide the impartiality and resources necessary to de escalate tensions, protect vulnerable populations, and facilitate constructive dialogue among all parties. We urge this Council to prioritize human rights, peace, and security. Supporting the deployment of United Nations peacekeeping force is not an infringement on sovereignty, but rather a demonstration of our collective commitment to peace and stability in South Asia. Thank you.
The voting process has begun.
Thank you. Now, who favors the resolution, please raise the hands. Those who are against, please raise their hands. Those who want to abstain, please raise their hands. Thank you.
Voting has finished. Results will be declared, Honorable Chair.
The result is as follows. In favor, 12. Against, 0. Abstention, 3. As the resolution got the required majority of 9 votes, the United Nations peacekeeping force will be deployed soon in Bangladesh, as per the procedure of the UN Charter. Thank you.